Tonight I have the privilege of introducing our speaker, a dear friend of mine. She'll be sharing her life story with us. In 2009, our paths crossed, kind of in a random church event. We ended up back in the back end of a church, as much as we can remember, in some pews. And our conversation went deep that night, and that conversation is still impacting women today. Because out of that conversation, we realized we both had a passion for women, and we wanted to encourage women in their journey of life. And it turned into an event that impacts women today. It's Joy in the Journey. So Marlene Troyer is a great friend of mine, and it's just been such a joy to walk with you and do life in our journeys together. We dreamed together, we prayed together, we cried together. We invested a lot of time into Joy in the Journey. Most of all, we celebrated God's goodness. If you ever sit on this team, over and over, we are impacted by how God comes through and does things that are so out of this world. We see his fingerprints and things that we couldn't plan, but he is so invested in each of you, and he cares about your lives and your stories. It is amazing. And today, I think Marlene and I both say bless you to these women who have taken on the torch and carried on something that we were excited about, and you do an incredible job. Marlene spoke at Joy in the Journey, the very first Joy in the Journey, and she talked on embracing the Father's love, and it is her heart. She also often referenced the idea of we are women who walk shoulder to shoulder with each other. Heard that often from her. We do life together, not just us, all of us. We don't walk alone. We do not. Tonight I'm going to invite Marlene to come. I'm excited to stand on this platform again. And we say thank you to God for taking a little tiny seed and making something so beautiful. We are just so grateful. I'm really excited to hear Marlene's story, just to get a picture and a glimpse into the rest of her life, things that I'm not sharing. But I'd like to pray for Marlene. Would you pray for me? Pray with me. Our Father in heaven, thank you that you're our Father and that you walk with us so beautifully. Thank you for the thread that you've woven through Marlene's life. You have known her from before she was ever here on this earth, and you had a plan for her, and that thread, you just run right through her life. And you're still working in her life. And God, I just pray for clarity, for peace. I pray that you would be glorified. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you.
Yep.
It's such a joy to be here tonight. Even though my heart's fluttering a little bit, and it's been fluttering for a couple days. So hopefully after tonight I can relax a little bit more. But I am excited to be here tonight, and there have been so many kind words said to me. Thank you. Thank you for your prayers. It's been probably one of the hardest talks that I've ever had in preparing. I don't know why I've talked, like Ruby said, I would have talked at the first Joy in the Journey has it been 15, 20? I don't know how many years, but that's been a long time ago. And there's a lot more to my story than back then. And so that's what I think made it really hard, was the older we get, the more we have to say about the goodness of God. And I have to stand up here and give testimony. God is a good God. And it's only as I was preparing, the thought came to me, or I was told, Marlene, you have a good story. Well, if I come up here and tell you I have a good story, I don't know, for a conservative Mennonite woman to say I don't know, it just seems a little proudful. But what makes my story a good story? It's not about me. It's not about me. And you know what? If God is in your story, God is a good God. And if God is in your story, you have a good story. And I have a good story to tell. Because it's not about us. It's about God. And it's the goodness of God. And as the theme this weekend of the grace of God. I don't know what your definition is of grace. But as I look back over my life, it's only by the grace of God. And my definition for grace is the power and the desire that comes from God to do his will. I know that's a little different definition, but that is one that I have used for years. And it's nothing of myself. It all comes from God. It's the power of God to do his will. As of yesterday, one of my themes in life, you might say, has been to pray for one another, bear each other's burdens. The Bible tells us in Galatians 6:2, it says, bear ye one another's burdens and so fulfill the law of Christ. And the other one is, confess your faults one to another and pray for one another that ye may be healed. The effectual fervent prayer of a righteous man availeth much. And the reason I share that, as it just seems like so many times we try to do life on our own, just me and God. And sometimes it gets really weighty. It gets really weighty. And I don't know what, as we were singing this song about trusting Jesus, cry to Jesus, and it said to dance to Jesus. And we need to take all our emotions to Jesus. But God has placed us in a place of fellow sisters that can help share that burden. I know not long ago I had a little talk, and the verse was, come to me, all ye that are heavy, come to me who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon me, learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your soul. We have to learn that lesson over and over and over again. Even though I've been speaking that for years, yesterday was a rough day. And, I've told people over the years, when you have that weight on you, call somebody. Confess your weakness, that fault that says is your weakness. Confess that to your sister, your husband maybe. And you know what? As of last night, I was just feeling weighty with no reason to know. And so, was preparing for this talk in the last, I've known it since November, I decided to just spend time in going over my story and spending time in the Word with verses that I have used for a long time. And I didn't really bring in new things for me. And so after last night, I decided to go back into one of my devotional books and just curious, what was God wanting to say to me through it? And he just afresh reminded me in such a way that just brought peace to my soul. And it was on the life of Abraham and the faithfulness that God showed Abraham. And he also was talking about when Moses and Joshua, when Moses had died and Joshua was taking on the responsibilities. And this is what he said to Joshua. Have not I commanded thee, be strong and of good courage. Be not afraid, neither be thou dismayed, for the Lord thy God is with thee, whithersoever thou goest. The Lord thy God is with you, Marlene, when you come up in front of all these people. Don't be dismayed. Isn't that powerful? That's what the Word of God does. That's what the Word of God does as we allow Him and go to Him, as we cry to Him, as we, in our journey. And so many times we can get distracted. I will be sharing a little bit later about some times that we just kind of run away and want to hide when we go through things. But the thing that we can run to Jesus is where there is rest, where we will find rest for our souls. And I always say, when you say rest for your soul, that means my mind, my will, and my emotions. God will deliver us and give us freedom in those areas. So, and the other thing I did after I was just struggling with what to say and share tonight, I did what I've been telling people to do for years. Reach out to somebody and tell them to pray for you. I knew that all along, but sometimes it's just hard to humble ourselves and ask for help. So I sent out a text to a friend of mine, and I said, I've really been struggling. I confessed my weakness and my fault. I said, I've really been struggling. I said, could you just pray for me? And I said, if you have a minute, it might be good for me to talk. And she didn't answer for probably an hour and a half. But when I pushed that button to send that text, literally, guys, ladies, I felt something come over me. And I went and got my notes, and I had tried this several times before because I was wanting to know how long this is going to take. And I was just trying to go through my notes to get a little bit of an idea. As I did that, I went back and I started on my notes, and I didn't even find out when she sent the text back because it just had a better flow to it. It wasn't maybe still the greatest. It seems like until you get up here, does God give you what you need to share? So in sharing my story, like I said, God is a good God, and the only reason that I can say it's a good story is because of the grace and goodness of God. I wanted to share also, I talked to someone here before the service, and they said, oh, I could never do that. And it's like, don't say you can't do that if you serve a good God. Because when Lori called me and asked me, I didn't think I was ready to do it either. This past year has been with a lot of pain from relationships. And you know, we have pain and sicknesses and health and other things, but I just heard it say recently, some of the most painful things we go through is from relationships. They hurt. They really do hurt. When we feel rejection and we don't quite fit in, we can't do it quite right for them, that's hard. And I have found in my life many times I have prayers that I pray when someone hurts me or rejects me. And it's basically the prayer, I choose to forgive, and put the name in there. I choose to forgive them for making me feel. And however it makes you feel, if it makes you feel rejected, and ask Jesus to come and speak peace to my soul which again, the soul is my mind, my will, and my emotions. And sometimes it doesn't anything necessarily happen, but I have chosen to forgive. And in the long term of life, it makes a difference. It really, really does make a difference. As I think about God being a good God, the Lord is good to all, and his tender mercies are all over his works. I would have lost heart unless I had believed that I would see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. That is so true in my life story. The Lord is good, a stronghold in the day of trouble, and he knows those who trust in him. Telling your story, it has really been good for me. I've shared my spiritual pilgrimage before, but when you think of your life story, it's just a little bit different. And as I think of my childhood experiences, to my youth, to my dating, to my marriage, to my children, to my grandchildren, that's a lot. That's a lot in the picture of life. I've been putting puzzles together a little bit this last year in Florida, and it was, as I was putting them together, I had this in my mind about telling my story, and I wondered how many pieces are in my puzzle to make a beautiful picture. If I think about how old I am, it's probably over 23,000 days that I've lived, and it's over 3,000 weeks that I've lived. So if I just take one a week, that's a 3,000. I've never put that big a puzzle together. But there's another thing that happened to me that had never happened to me before. I love puzzles. And I was putting this puzzle together, and it was the most complicated puzzle I have ever put together. It was a lot of the same color, and it had a lot of the same shapes. And I would put a piece in, and all at once, nothing fit anymore. And so I had to go back, and this one doesn't quite fit. Long story short, I quit and put the puzzle back in the box. What if God or we would give up on putting the pieces together? It would never become a beautiful picture, and we can only do that through God. And as I reviewed my story after some time and just asking God, what kind of title could I give to my story? And God gave me this title, that God makes things beautiful in his time, not my time, in his time. And I can give testimony to how God has made things beautiful in his time. And the first time I went back to a time in my life, and this has probably been over 20 years ago, when I was in a complex situation with relationships. And here again, I wanted to fix things now. I wanted to be fixed now. And I can specifically remember where I was at in our house, and I just cried out to God, and I said, what can I do? What can I do? What am I doing wrong? Why are these things happening to me? And I wanted to fix it in the worst way. And almost, it was not an audible voice. But God gave me these words: good things take time. So that is where my title came from. Good things take time. And that's been over 20 years ago. But I have chosen to continue to forgive. Like I said, the prayer that I just shared, I continue to forgive. I've continued to be kind. And I have seen many times in my life where there was relationship issues, and I remember sometimes going somewhere what I knew this person was going to be, and I would just pray, and guess what? God would bring us in the same seat or whatever it was. Isn't he good at doing things like that? And I could have freedom to talk to that person, not because of who I am, but because of what God can do through me. And this past year, even though it was hard, it has also been a time of healing in my life. Things that I was feeling back then were revealed for the reason I was feeling the heaviness. And I thought things were healed. I thought things were good. But God took me even a step further of healing this past year. And I just am so excited. And probably one of the reasons during those years, there was a part of me that died to the giftings I feel that God had given to me because I just thought there was something wrong with me. And when Lori called and asked me to come and speak, I was like, I don't want to put myself out there. I don't want to. And I say that with emotions. I literally waited for probably, I think it was a month after I was told that I should let her know. And I was talking to my son one day, and he had no idea. I didn't tell very many people. I don't know if I told anybody up until that time besides my husband. I asked him, what do you think I should do? He said, well, why wouldn't you do it? That was his advice. And then I told him why I wouldn't do it. And he didn't say much. He said, well, that's up to you. And then my son called me one day, and we just randomly got into a conversation about he started doing running. And he said, it's hard work. And he says, Mom, we've got to do the hard. You've got to do the hard. And I felt God's prompting me to put myself out there again. But I just still was scared. And so I talked to him today, and I said, you're the one that got me into this trouble. He says, what do you mean? I didn't even tell him before today. He said, what do you mean I got you in trouble? I said, you're the one that's making me nervous. That's the reason I said yes. And I talked to various other people and says, Marlene, you can do it. And today I've heard that so many times. But to be honest with you, I was shaking in my boots for a while. Okay, that is just a little bit of an introduction. I was, as far as God making beautiful in his time, as my title, Ecclesiastes 3:11 has that verse in it. He has made everything suitable for its time. Moreover, he has put a sense of the past and the future into their minds. Yet they cannot find out what God has done from the beginning to the end. Another translation says, in the part that I think we know what it means, he makes everything beautiful in his time. But it was interesting, the rest of that verse, that he says, he has given us human beings awareness of eternity, but in such a way that we cannot fully comprehend from beginning to end. We cannot fully comprehend when the hard times come what God is actually doing. We don't know the end product. 20 years ago, I didn't know that I would receive more healing today or this last year. But we can always go back that we know all things. It doesn't say just some of the things. all things work together for good, good, to them that love the Lord, to them that are called according to his purpose. He doesn't say that all things are good. He doesn't say that when we go through afflictions and sickness, and whether it be miscarriages, whatever the heart is for you, he doesn't say that is good, but he does say he will work it out for our good. God is a loving God. And if you just think about us just being able to lay ourselves at his feet, to give ourselves to him, because just think about what he did for us. Think of the agony. And I've always heard, or I've applied this to my life, when I'm going through a rough time, think about the cross and what Jesus did for you and me. And the load gets lighter. The load gets lighter. We know God is a good God, but we do not always understand the process in showing us his redemptive plan. And it may not be until we see him face to face in heaven. His ways are higher than our ways. And many times we have tunnel vision when we're going through the hard. God sees the whole picture. How many of you have read or heard Johnny Erickson Tata? There's a lot of you. Some of you don't. She has been one of my heroes. I remember going to a movie theater, which was against the rules, but I did it, to watch her movie about when she had a diving accident. And she dove, for those of you who don't know her story, she dove into a lake of water and hit her neck, hit her head, and was paralyzed from the waist down. She has, if any of you get a chance to listen to some of her reels or her blogs, she is just a tremendous challenge and blessing with how God has used her to minister the truth of the gospel to lots of people who are in wheelchairs. She's been in a wheelchair for the rest of her. She was in a wheelchair for the rest of life. She also goes on to share about how she so desired to be healed. And she went into a deep, dark hole of depression, and God brought her out of that depression, and God is using her, and she has faith like I've never seen anyone else have, as far as in how God has used that hard story. And some of us have a lot harder stories than others. I've faced some hard, but not like some of you. I'm now going to start, and I have to keep these things really brief, or I might have you here for hours. So I am not going to talk a whole lot about my childhood. I came from a good Christian home. I had a good mom and dad that taught me well, and some very foundational truths about who God is. And my father was a person that I did not have to work through the whole thing that I know a lot of people do. When they see God as their father. My father was loving, and he was a good father. Not saying he was perfect. There's things that I had to unlearn that he taught me, but I still am grateful for my home life and the young years as a child. I now am going to, oh, there it is. I didn't know that was up there already. But anyways, this is my family. I am the oldest of 7 children, and it's me, then my 2 brothers, Marlene and Myron, and then Trish and Joanne, my 2 sisters, and then Mom had 5 of us in 7 years, and then she waited 8 years and had what we always called, and to this day they still are, the 2 little boys, Stephen and Ryan. We have our differences as a family to this day, and we obviously look a lot different than this now. But I honestly can say that we have good relationships. It's not that we're really close, we're all over. I'm the only one in Ohio. I have a sister in North Carolina, Trish, she lives in North Carolina, and my sister Joanne is in Colorado, and I also have a brother in Colorado. And my second to oldest brother passed away 3 years ago at the age of 55. He had a stroke, which is very unexpected, which was a very hard time. But so I am so grateful for that. The foundation. Sometimes I don't think we realize what we have when we had a mother and a father that rocked us, that held us. It's huge. And so I feel like that gave me a pretty good foundation to begin on. That's about all I'm going to say about my childhood. The next thing I'm going to share with you is about key relationships in my journey of life. I became a Christian at the age of 15. I was at a Gospel Echoes church meeting, and it actually was the first program that Nelson and Sarah Koblenz, and it was Jean Beachy and Margaret Beachy. I think I'm probably older than most of you here. I don't know. But anyways, it's been a long time ago, at the age of 15, and he gave an invitation, and I went forward, and I received Jesus as my Savior. And I am so grateful for that beginning of my relationship with God and with Jesus. I will say that night I was prompted that I should go back to my parents and ask them to forgive me for the wrongs that I had done. And, you know, as a child, I never was a really bad person, which does not make me better than anybody else. That's another story. My husband, which I'll get to that later, and I'll tell you a little bit what he said about that. I didn't go, so I felt like that did quench some of the Holy Spirit working in my life when I decided against not doing that. So a year later, my parents allowed me to go to some youth meetings in northern Indiana, and Aiden Troyer, which probably a lot of you know, was the speaker that weekend, and I can't even remember exactly what he spoke on, but I was convicted about not listening to what God was asking me to do. And I responded, and his wife, Leona, prayed with me. And that night, I don't know how to explain what happened, but other than that, heaven came down and flooded my soul. I felt so light, and I purposed, and I went back to my parents, and that was another good experience. And there were many other times that I recommitted my life. Interesting fact, about 7 years later, Aiden became my uncle through marriage. That was my husband's uncle, and he actually preached our wedding sermon. So just an interesting thing that God weaves into our stories at times. Another key relationship is, of course, when I met my husband. I'm not going to share a lot about our dating experience. There's a lot of detail that can go into that. I have it down here, but I decided, you know what? I think I'll just move on. I learned so much through my relationship with my husband. We come from totally different backgrounds. He was, quote, one of those wild Amish boys. I never expected to marry that type of person because some of my experiences with some of the wild Amish, by the way, I was born in Akron, Canton, Hartville, Ohio. My dad was from there, and then we moved to southern Indiana soon after I was born, Davis County, Indiana. That's where my mom was from. And we lived there until I was 21, and then we moved to Florida. And that is where I met my husband, Larry Troyer, who is actually from here in Sugar Creek. But I want to say, if there's ever proof that God is real, I have said this before, it's my husband. God did a miraculous work in his life. I did not know him before he was a Christian. And while we were dating, we dated for 6 months and broke up, and then both went into VS, got back together, and dated for 9 more months and got married. But while we were dating, there was, with our different backgrounds and stuff, there were a lot of things to work through. But God used his life to teach me so much about the power of God and how God can change dramatically an ungodly life of drugs, alcohol, and immorality to a God-fearing man desiring to do life God's way. And one of the things that my husband took very seriously when he heard about clearing his conscience, the Bible says, and beloved, if our conscience do not accuse us, if our consciences do not accuse us, we have the confidence and assurance and boldness before God, if our conscience does not accuse us. Another one is holding fast to faith and having a good conscience by rejecting and thrusting from a good conscience. Some individuals have made shipwreck of their life. So if we don't clear our conscience, I feel it's a tool that the enemy can use to just continue to push us down. And we can make shipwreck of our life. And so he took this to very seriously. And as we were dating and he was purposing to make things right with everyone that he knew possible. And he went to great lengths. He made phone calls. He had stole something years before, went back into the store and told them. And it was just a really, it was so rewarding and faith-building to see how God worked. And I remember specifically one time when I was with him this was while we were dating, that he said, I need to go make things right with this person. And I was with him. But he says, I can't remember where they live. I think I kind of know the general area, but I can't remember exactly. So we're driving down the road, and he says, I think we turn here. And so we turned there, and we went for a little ways, and he said, you know what? I think it's that house. And so we went, I stayed in the car. He went into the house. Guess who came to the door? The person he wanted to talk to. And when we're serious about making things right, it's amazing how God works. He's a good God. God makes things beautiful in his time. I seriously think, actually years later, well, after we were married, and I'm going to get to the part of when we were called to go to Freedom Hills, we went for training at a counseling for caring for the heart out in Colorado with John Regier. And while we were out there, he was supposed to be there to sit in as training, and for some reason, the counselee did not show up. He said it was the first time it happened. And then Larry just said, you know what? I have wondered for a long time what it would be like to sit on the other side of the chair, because he had been doing counseling. And so for 3 days, we were in counseling with John Regier. And as he asked me some of the things because of the lifestyle that Larry had lived and what I would be feeling, I felt none of it. And I honestly feel it's because of the seriousness he took in making things right and going back and confessing. Another thing that I was concerned about while we were dating is if we get married, and I was aware of the verse that it says, if, let me find this verse. It will be handed down to the third and fourth generations, the sins of the fathers. I'm not following my notes too well. Deuteronomy 5, 9, and 10 say, you shall not bow down to them or worship them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, punishing them for the sin of the fathers to the third and fourth generations, to those that hate me. And that's the part of the verse that I knew. And I was concerned about if we get married and have children, what's going to happen? Are they going to have to go down that path too? And so I went to our pastor's wife, and she said, Marlene, you need to read the rest of that verse. I didn't know the rest of the verse. The rest of that verse says, but showing love to those that hate me, but showing love to 1,000 generations, to those that love me and keep my commandments. Isn't that just the best news? Isn't it the best thing ever that God is much more merciful and healing than our sin is damaging? So when we sow faith, you can actually break the cycle of sin. That brings me to after we were dating and we worked through lots of things, and I had lots of questions. I was the one that mainly had questions. He always said, I knew you were the right one. But when we broke up that one time, he said, I knew you were the right one, it just wasn't the right time. And that was true. And so we were engaged in August of '86. I can honestly say, looking back, I don't know that there was a better day. I was very excited to spend the rest of my life with him. We were married February 14th, 1987. We just had our 39th anniversary on February 14th. By the way, he always tells people too, it's a national holiday. So we celebrate nationally. No. I have been married to my best friend. There is no one I would rather spend time with. Does he always get me? No, he doesn't. Do I always get him? And you know what? I want to say that you would think after being married 39 years, yeah, that's us, a few years back, 39 years that maybe we would get each other, but you know what? It's different seasons. We are now in retirement season, and he's at home a lot more, and I don't feel the freedom that I used to, so we've got to talk some more. And, but it's good. It's good. And probably one of the key things, I was just talking to him last night about it, having the perfect marriage. He says he feels we have the perfect marriage. But what is a perfect marriage? It's not perfect in the way that you would say we do things all right all the time. It's not that. But what makes a perfect marriage is when I can come back to you and say, I was wrong. Can you forgive me? It goes a long ways and renews your love for each other. It has been the best adventure in my life. The good far outweighs the hard. God has gifted us with 6 children. Is this working? There we go. 6 children, and they're all married. And I just haven't even said anything, but these are all my daughters and daughter-in-law and granddaughters up here, my biggest support team there is. I feel so blessed to have them here. We have the 6 children, they're all married, and we have 5 girls and 1 boy. Jensen, Yolanda, Hannah, Annie, Jensen, Emily, and Alicia, and our son Jensen. They have gifted me with 18 grandchildren, and this picture is outdated. There has been 3 added. This one, Xander, and Reed, and Nolan have been added to that picture since we took the picture. And I say, sometimes I get exasperated trying to keep up because we have about 3 a year. And we have 2 more coming this year. As far as I know, there's not 3. There's still time, probably, possibly. So, anyways, I feel so blessed with a happy family who love and forgive each other. Do we have conflict? Yes, we have conflict. We have disagreements. But we just got back from Florida. They were all down there on spring break with us, which is almost 30. There was 5 that weren't there. But so there was 28 of us together in Florida. And it's a big crew. And there's lots of activity and lots of things going on. And when you talk about conflict, I can talk about the adults, but when you get 3 3-year-olds or 2 and 3-year-olds in the same house, sometimes we're glad when it's time to go home. But I feel it's such a blessing. That's about my family. Now I want to talk a little bit about our passion for missions. Larry and I, after we were married, we had meetings at our church, and it was on a mission emphasis week, and Larry and I both responded to God's call to spend some time in full-time missions. We didn't know where, we didn't know what. And so we just opened ourselves up to God's leading as to where he would want us to go. the first opportunity that came up, someone came to us from the community and asked us if we would be willing to go to North Carolina to help with a church plant. We thought it sounded like a good idea, and we liked the idea. And for 2 years, we went up and we scouted out land to see where would be a good place. And we're a part of a group of people that wanted, from different states, to start a community in North Carolina. In making that decision, we had asked a pastor friend of ours, how do you know? How do you know when and where is the right time and to go? And his answer to us was, is it biblical? Opened and closed doors? And do you have peace about it? Do both of you have peace about it? And two of those, yes, it was biblical, and we both had peace about it. We put our house up for sale, and Larry had a lawn business at that time. We put that up for sale, and for 2 years we tried to sell our lawn business and our house. We had a contract on our house. The day before we were to sign the contract, they came and said they're not interested anymore. So those doors didn't open and seemed to be closed doors. The rest of them went, some of them went, but we stayed there. And I think it was a year or so later that someone called from Freedom Hills and asked us if we would be willing to come and serve at Freedom Hills. We said we will consider it, but this was in July, I think, or August, and with my husband being a lawn man, he said, we cannot come right now. It's too busy of season. The following, I think it was in August, because then in September, Larry's grandma died, and it was up here where they wanted to have an interview with us. So it changed the plans, and we could make it work. We came up, we had an interview, and told them that there's some things, the doors are going to have to open and see if we can sell our business and our house. Long story short, we went back home and put our business for sale, and our house was for sale too, but God worked it out that within 6 weeks' time, both of those doors were open. Our business was sold, our house was rented to his brother and his wife, who rented the thing for the whole 9 years we were at Freedom Hills. God gives direction when we seek him. And so we then came to Freedom Hills for a 2-year term. After we were there 2 years, we committed for another year, and we ended up being at Freedom Hills for 9 years. When we moved to Freedom Hills, Yolanda was 4, Hannah was 2.5, and Annie was 6 months, and a day after I got there, I found out I was pregnant with our son, Jensen, although I didn't know it was a boy at that time. That was not exactly in the plan, but that's when we got our boy. It's our only boy. So I feel very blessed. We had, like I said, many good and challenging years. And when we first came to Freedom Hills, it started out with men and women who were, just men that were out of prison and jail coming. It was like a halfway house into society. And through a series of events, we were asked, the state was asking us to take these men back into Mount Vernon, a town close by, for professional counseling because our counseling was not professional. And through that whole series, it caused a lot of issues with the men. They got involved with, they could get drugs there, and it just didn't work well together. And so at a banquet, with that in mind, that I could tell you so many stories about that time too, but because of time, I'm going to keep moving on. Went to a Freedom Hills banquet, and there was an Amish lady that came up to Larry after the banquet and asked, would you be willing to take my husband? And that was a turn when Freedom Hills started taking people from our own Mennonite and Amish culture. There were many changes as we walked through the experience there at Freedom Hills. It later became a place where couples could come, which is, I think that's what it is today yet. But, and singles could come. But those were very challenging years and growing years in our faith. Seeing people's lives changed was very faith-building. During the time at Freedom Hills, for the most part, I was kept busy being a mom. We would have had all 6 of our children there then, and I homeschooled and assisted my husband where I could with retreats. It was so interesting. Last night, I hadn't done this for years. I was trying to find a folder to put my notes in, and I picked up this folder, and here it was, all the notes, all the newsletters from Freedom Hills. And I just read some of the newsletters, and it was just a very, challenging and good time to see how God worked in our lives and hearts through the ministry there at Freedom Hills. We often said, Larry and I have said already, God knew he needed to put us in counseling because we needed it. And so as we learned right along with everybody else, and I just want to say, if you're having a struggle, when we went to Caring for the Heart, one thing that he said as we worked through our pain from our past and things, he said, you guys are doing a good job in your marriage, but he said, in 3 days' time, I probably moved you ahead about 20 years. So just knowing and pinpointing things to hurts and pain in your life, it's a good thing. Leaving Freedom Hills was a little harder than actually deciding to come to Freedom Hills. Larry would think at one time, it's time to leave. I would think another time, it's like, I think it's time for us to move on. And we just kind of went back and forth for probably a couple of years. And then we finally came together on a decision and decided it was time to move. It was nothing in particular that was telling us, but we just felt like it was a time for a break. We left Freedom Hills in 2002 and moved into the house where we still live now. Larry started a job doing construction work. We were, for about a year and a half, he did construction work, and in December of 2004, he fell 20 feet on frozen surface. It was a snowy, icy morning, and he had a ladder, and he climbed up 20 feet and was getting ready to put on the last piece of siding and his plank. The ladder slipped out from under it. It had snow in it and slipped out, and he fell 20 feet. So grateful that it seemed like it was a little thing. He crushed his calcaneus, which is his heel. That's a little thing, but it's a big thing. He ended up being off of work for over a year, just dealing with many surgeries and things after that. But I want to say and testify to God's goodness in that situation too. We had 6 children. Yolanda was 16, and our youngest one was 5, I think. And For a mother, it was very overwhelming to think of the responsibility of taking even the financial responsibility. He did have workman's comp, which did help some. But the overflow of God's goodness and God's people was overwhelming. They did fundraisers, people gave us money, and it was interesting to note at the end of that year, we made as much money came in as what we had made the previous year. That's God. God is good. We also, one experience during that time that I don't think a lot of us will forget is we made the fundraiser pizzas as a family. We had a line up in the garage, and Yolanda was old enough to go deliver them. And it was a good time, but it was a time of big responsibility too. But I don't think any of us like those pizzas very good anymore. One thing I will say too, we had decided just before he fell that we wanted to put an addition onto the house. So it was a time of tears for me, as far as because we did need a bigger house with our 6 children. But God had a plan for that too. I didn't say, he fell and they just cast it and had it in a cast for 6 months. He went into therapy and did therapy. And at the end of his therapy, the therapist looked at him and he said, I think you need to get a second opinion after 6 months. Within a few days, we went and got a second opinion. And the doctor came in after x-rays and tests, and he said he needs to have surgery as soon as possible. I burst into tears. I literally burst into tears because I didn't think I could do it another 6 months. Not that Larry was a terrible patient. He wasn't. He was a good patient. But when God allowed that to happen, he had a purpose and a plan in mind. And he showed me how he cares about me and my family. Like I said, with money, and also men from the church came in and did our audition. God is a good God and makes things beautiful in his time. I remember after his second surgery, I asked the doctor, I said, so my husband was athletic and played basketball and softball. And I just asked him after the surgery, I said, so does this mean that he will be able to go out and play softball and basketball again? He said, this surgery was performed just so he can comfortably walk into the grocery store and back. He also told us that construction was no longer for him. It would be good for us to look for another job because of the lateral movement he lost this way and this way. And his leg is about 3/4 inch shorter than the other one to this day. It was just so jammed. They said that when he fell, it was like taking a potato chip and taking your hand and crushing it. That's how many pieces his heel was in. So after that, he decided to work in sales with a window and door company, and he had 2 different jobs working in sales. But he always told me, Marlene, this is just temporary. It's not really a fit for me. And then he started telling me, I think we should start a bulk food store. You have to realize that I am homeschooling 6 children at the time. And he said, you're going to have to help me the first few years. And I was like, how am I ever going to do that? And, going back to the decision we made to come to Freedom Hills, that we both need to have peace about it, I didn't have peace about it. I just felt, I don't know how I'm going to do it, dear. And so I asked him, I just told him I don't think I can do it. And so kind of left it lay for a while. During that time, his father passed away, and we kind of put it on the back shelf. In the meantime, 2 of the locations that we were thinking about starting, 2 bulk food stores had went in there already. And so as time went on and he kept bringing it up, I was listening to a radio program one day, and as I was listening, this lady was telling her story about how her husband felt like they should move to another state to have a church plant. She said she did not have peace about it. She just didn't feel at peace about it. But God continued to work on her heart, and her husband continued to feel like that was the best thing for them to do. And she came to the point where she said, she told her husband, God has put you as my leader and my husband to lead and to guide our family. If you really feel this is what God wants you to do, we'll go. And I will be behind you and support you 100%. It spoke to my heart. I went home and told my husband, my heart still feels a little overwhelmed, but because God has given you to me as my leader, I am going to be 100% behind you to start a bulk food store. It was a very short time later that we found the place to start a bulk food store. 2 weeks before we were ready to open, someone called me and said, is it true that you're opening a bulk food store at so-and-so place? I said, Lord willing, we're waiting on some permits to be passed, but Lord willing, we are planning to do that. And she said, very interesting, because we were going to open a bulk food store right across the road from you. So God made work things out in his time again there. In a short summary about the store, God has blessed us beyond whatever I thought or imagined. When I look at that store, I don't even look at it as our store. It was a God thing. It was a God thing. I know we had one customer, and you know what? It's a mission. It's a mission. It's been a mission to the employees that work here. We have some of our employees are here tonight that are great employees. And when we opened the store, I remember telling somebody, if we could do $500 a day, I think we can get by. And that was with we were going to run it just as a family. We had Yolanda had just got married. And the rest of them and she helped some too. And so I had 6 children. Alicia was 10. She ran the cash register. And we thought we were going to do it all by ourselves. Well, it was within a couple weeks we had to hire. And we never did do $500. And God has just abundantly blessed us in that business, and I give him glory for it. One customer came in one day and said, you know what? If you guys were out in the middle of a cornfield, people would find you. And that is not us. That's a God thing. As of now, right now, we still are involved. Larry is still involved in the store some. I hardly ever go there anymore. I said I taught them everything they knew there, but now I don't know anything. Because when we started the store, Larry, it was almost 2 years that the children and I would have run the store. He was there to support, and he helped when he could after work and so forth. But then he came in full time after we were able to make enough to support ourselves. Jensen, our son, we were in that little store for 9 years. That was just we were renting and leasing a store. And then after 9 years, we ended up purchasing land and building our own store. And we have now been in there for over 5 years. And Jensen is, before we ever built the store, we had a meeting with our children and said, we will not make this step unless someone is interested. And Jensen was, and he is now, he now is purchasing the retail store, part of the store. We are now in that season of life called retirement. It's really good. It's really hard. If you think about seasons where you go to work every day, and your husband goes to work every day, he's enjoying it very much, but at the same time, it has been hard at times to know how to make that switch. God is a good God and makes things beautiful in his time. I am running out of time, but I do want to share with you some of our health journeys that we have had. See if I can find. This is our granddaughter Blair. In the picture, it'd be on your left, where she was, Annie had lost fluid and was not able to birth her and had to have an emergency C-section at 26 weeks. And at 26 weeks, she weighed 1 pound and 6 ounces and was transferred to Akron-Canton Children's Hospital, which was a very scary time. And again, I say, Jesus speaks peace in the storm. I also have another granddaughter. This is her at 26 weeks. That doesn't do justice to how small she was. She literally would fit in my hand. That's how small she was. And her little hand, I have a picture of it, but her little hand, I have her clenching with her hand went over my thumbnail. That's how small she was. And I was going to bring the pamper along. I still have the pamper. I'm sure Annie does too. But her pamper is about like that they used on her. It is a total miracle. And today, there are maybe some effects that she feels from being a preemie, but she's in kindergarten, and you see her and is thriving. That's a good God. And another story is, this is Maya, Yolanda's oldest daughter, and I think I would have shared about her, and this is one of the reasons that I actually quit Joy in the Journey, because of the responsibilities that were going on with helping Yolanda. She became very sick. There was some other health struggles before, but at 10 months old, she ended up in the ER, and we were coming home from Florida, stopped at the hospital, and they were waiting. They wanted to keep her for the night. We met them at the emergency room. There's so many details that could go into it, but we decided I needed to go home and get a vehicle. We took their vehicle home, and on the way home from the hospital that night, I knew she was sick, but we didn't know how sick she was. And by the time I got home, I was just coming down the hill to our home in Gambier, Ohio, and they called and they said, Mom, they had to intubate her, and she's not breathing on her own, and she just went down suddenly. I sat in that hospital room for days. I'm not exactly sure how many days it was. She laid there, like you see her there. She was lifeless. You could see she was breathing, but that was with the help of the machines. And they were running all kinds of tests, and we found out later that they usually don't let a lot of people go back to the IC unit where she was, but they let all of us go back. They let our whole family go back, and his and Matt's side of the family too. And we realized later that's because they thought she wasn't going to make it. And I sat there in that room believing that God had a good plan. And God did give us the grace to walk through it. And she had been to doctors before that said she was legally blind. And I happened to be in there when they came in there this was after, I think it was it 3 or 4 days? I remember I was in the room and I saw her move her toe. And I was like, thank you, Jesus. Thank you, Jesus. Meant so much to see that little toe move. Long story short, within 14 days, we left the hospital. She was on a feeding tube. We were like, how are we going to do this? I went with Yolanda back, and they were teaching us how to use a feeding tube. And anyways, she is here tonight. I don't know where she's at, but she told me I wasn't allowed to have her come up here. So, and this is her today. This was actually just last week when we were in Florida on the beach. And, you know, when I see her at field days at school and she's running around those bases, I am so grateful to God. And you know, not all stories end like that. They don't. But another health story yet I want to add to that. Her father, Yolanda's husband, at the age of 36, which is 3 years ago, was diagnosed with colon cancer, stage 3 colon cancer. They told us he did chemo and radiation, and they said there was, I think, a 90% chance that he would have to have surgery even after that to remove things. He did the chemo and radiation, and they went in and tested, and they said he looks 100% normal. God performed a miracle. I feel God performed a miracle even with Maya. Maya was, like I said, declared legally blind before she ever went in there. And when the doctors came in to check her during that 2-week stay, they didn't even realize it. And they said, oh, her eyesight's good. I said, what? I said, she was just diagnosed as being legally blind. I feel God performed another miracle. And I'm so grateful that God chose to give us those gifts. But if not, and I remember when we found out that Matt had colon cancer, I remember, what do you say to your daughter? I can't tell her that it's all going to be okay because I don't know, in the sense of if he's going to be healed. But I can say, because of the goodness of God, Yolanda, whatever happens, we do know that God will be good to us and he will take care of us. God is a good God. He gives us the grace to go through those circumstances. 5 years ago, our parents moved in with us. This is just another story. But one thing I wanted to say about those areas of health issues and the dramatic things that happened to us as a family. There were times that I found out what it was like to be surrendered to what God has in his plan for our family. I remember, I've been around people that have lost loved ones. Our daughter Hannah experienced losing her best friend at 16, and my sister's son at age 9 was accidentally was shot. And so I know what it's like to hear that anguish and agonizing cry of losing something you love deeply. I did not maybe experience that to the extent, but that whole thing of saying, God, I give them to you. If you choose to take them, it's okay. I know what it's like to feel that anguish in my heart. And I believe that God enough, and that He's a good God, that He has a bigger picture than I can see if He would have chosen to take them. 5 years ago, my parents, we became empty nesters in one sense. In another sense, when my daughter, Emily, got married, and she moved to Virginia, and my elderly parents moved in with us. Mom, Daddy still lives with us part-time. He goes to Florida for the winter, but he's still with us part-time. But my mom was diagnosed with cancer in December of 3 years ago. This is 23. Yeah. It was 3 years ago that she was diagnosed with cancer, and it happened so fast. She was not feeling well in September, and with the whole COVID thing, things just got prolonged and put off. And she was diagnosed with cancer on December the 7th, and by January 6th, she passed. And I would have thought she was a healthy woman. I would have thought my dad would go before her. And it was such a shock. But I say that to say, during the years, it was hard for her to make that adjustment, to move in with us and just give up the thing of not having her own kitchen. And there was some maybe ungratefulness that I felt from her when I felt like it was somewhat, I don't want to say it was a burden, but it was an extra chore. And there were some hurtful words said during that time. My mom was a good mom. She was a godly woman. And because of the hurts and pain in her past, I feel like was some of the responses that came from her. But I just want to say how God makes things beautiful in His time. I chose to forgive her for those things, but it still hurt. They still left the scars. And as I was, as she was on her deathbed, both of my sisters, it was the day she actually died. My sisters were there, and we were all sitting out around the kitchen table, and her room was just around the door. We just took a little break. We were in there most of the time, but hospice had been there that day and told us that, it could be another week before she passes. And I'm like, how? How? Because she suffered a lot. And we were ready to see her. We had released her and told her she could go. And we were sitting around the table, and as I thought I heard her, and all us sisters looked at each other. Did you hear something? They said, yeah. So I got up, and I went in to my mother. I told my girls I don't think I could share this, but they said I need to. She said my name. She hadn't talked for 2 days. She said, Marlene. And that's what she was calling, that we heard. She said, I just want to thank you for everything you've done for me. My mom was not an affectionate person. She took my hand and kissed my hand. Neither did they. We knew they loved us, but it wasn't a practice of saying, I love you. She said, I love you. Such a gift. I will treasure that forever. And that's why I say, Follow God's ways, and he will make things beautiful in his time. Thank you.